Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have a really fascinating and frankly strange stack of research to get through. I was going through the source material you sent over, and I have to admit, for a minute there, I honestly thought you'd sent me two different deep dives by mistake.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the first half of the snack, it reads like a corporate training manual. High-performance psychology, managing stress in the boardroom. There's stuff from Navy SEALs in here. It's all very standard uh, productivity culture stuff. But then I get to the second half, and all of a sudden I'm reading these translated Sanskrit texts about, believe it or not, the physiological symptoms of impending death and how to build a subtle body for the afterlife.
I can see why that would look like a mistake. It does seem like two completely different worlds. But the whole premise of this deep dive, and what I think makes these sources so powerful when you put them together, is that they aren't separate at all. What we have here is really a masterclass in what the sources call high-performance pressure management.
High-performance pressure management. That definitely sounds like a LinkedIn headline. But I think what we're really talking about, the thread connecting these two worlds, is the biology of transition, right? Whether that transition is a server crashing at work and you're in crisis mode, or it's the biological machinery literally shutting down at the end of a life.
That is the unifying theme. Exactly. Human beings, we operate under pressure. We're designed to function within this very narrow band of comfort. And when we get pushed out of that band, whether it's by an angry email or by our own mortality, our default setting is just panic. The mission of these sources, if you want to call it that, is to move us from panic, which is basically a biological accident, to protocol, which is a deliberate engineered response.
And that word protocol, that's doing a lot of heavy lifting today. The idea that you can systemize your response to fear.
You have to. You absolutely have to, because as we're about to see, you cannot think your way out of a high-pressure situation. Your brain literally won't let you. It shuts down the thinking part, so you need a manual. And we're essentially covering three manuals today. Part one is the hardware, the raw, nitty-gritty physiology of why you get stupid when you're stressed.
Okay, the hardware.
Part two is the software. These are the mental models to install to override that stupidity.
And part three, that's the advanced manual, the death protocols. Which I have to say is one of the most unusual and frankly fascinating takes on the afterlife I have ever read. It treats death less like a spiritual mystery and more like a space shuttle launch.
It's an engineering problem. That's exactly how the ancients viewed it. But, before we can even think about launching the shuttle, we need to understand the cockpit. We need to start with what happens to you right now in your body when things go wrong.
Let's do it. So, section one, the biomechanics of duress, or as the source puts it, why you get stupid. It opens with a pretty aggressive statement. It says, handling pressure isn't a character trait. It's a biological state.
And that is such a crucial distinction to make right at the top. We have this whole cultural narrative that if you freeze up during a presentation or if you panic in a real emergency, it's because you're weak. It's a moral failing. You just don't have enough grit.
Right. The whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps idea. You just need to toughen up.
Exactly. But the physiology argues that is impossible. You cannot willpower your way out of a nervous system hijack. It's like trying to use your thoughts to stop digesting your food. It's an autonomous process. When a threat pops up, and it could be a tiger or it could be an angry email from your boss, the brain doesn't care. You undergo what's called a sympathetic nervous system dump.
The dump. It sounds incredibly unglamorous.
It is. It's messy. It's unglamorous. It's a chemical flood. And it happens so fast, we're talking about a 0.5-second timeline, half a second.
Walk me through that half second. So I open my inbox. I see a subject line in all caps. Urgent. Server down. My heart does that little flutter thing. What is the chain reaction inside my body?
Okay, so the first domino to fall is in the amygdala. You can think of it as the smoke detector of your brain. It's the threat detection center. It sees that subject line and it immediately makes a decision. The logic center, the prefrontal cortex, is way too slow to handle this.
So the CEO, the rational part of the brain, gets locked out of the building while the security team takes over.
That's a perfect analogy. The amygdala completely bypasses it. This is what's known as the amygdala hijack. It goes straight to the HPA axis. That stands for hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals. It's a cascade command. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which then signals the adrenals to just dump cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream.
And that's where the physical feelings kick in. The source mentions vasoconstriction, which I'm guessing explains why my hands get ice cold when I'm nervous.
That's it exactly. It's a hydraulic shift. Your body's operating system is ancient. It assumes that stress means physical trauma. It thinks you are literally about to get bitten by something or cut with a spear. So it pulls all the blood away from your extremities, your hands, your feet, and pulls it into the core to protect your vital organs, and importantly, to minimize bleeding if you lose a finger or a toe.
Which is a fantastic feature if I'm fighting a wolf in the woods.
Yeah,
But it's a terrible feature if I'm trying to type a nuanced, careful response on a keyboard.
precisely. You immediately lose fine motor skills. Your fingers get clumsy. But it's not just the extremities. It also shunts blood away from your digestive system. That's why you get that feeling of butterflies or even outright nausea. Digestion is an expensive biological luxury. Your body says you don't need to digest that sandwich if you're about to become lunch.
So the body is stripping everything down to the bare essentials for survival, fight or flight. But the stat in here that really truly shocked me was about intelligence. The source claims we essentially become dumber.
That's the cognitive decoupling. And for anyone in a knowledge-based job, this is the scariest part. Because the blood is leaving the forebrain, your logic center, to fuel the muscles, your functional IQ drops. And it's not a small drop. We're talking anywhere from 15 to 40 points, depending on how severe the dump is.
15 to 40 points. That is massive.
Yeah.
That's the difference between being a certified genius and being average, or being average and being, well, functionally impaired.
You literally become stupider. Your ability to process complex logic, to understand nuance, to think about future consequences, it just evaporates. Your thinking becomes binary. Fight or flee, good or bad, threat or not threat. That's why you say things in a heated argument that you regret 5 minutes later. The part of your brain that understands long-term consequences was completely offline.
The source also gets into some of the more extreme symptoms. It lists something called auditory exclusion. I think I've heard of this in, police reports, where officers in a shootout don't even hear their own gunshots.
It happens in high-stress corporate environments too, just, less dramatically. You literally stop processing language. Someone can be standing right next to you, giving you clear instructions on how to fix the server, and you hear the sound of their voice, but the meaning doesn't land. Your brain has decided that processing audio is a lower priority than visually scanning for threats.
And tachypsychia, the distortion of time.
Right, the classic Matrix effect. Time seems to slow down to a crawl. Or, on the flip side, you can lose hours and have no memory of what happened. It's the brain messing with the frame rate of your consciousness, trying to intake more data than usual to survive.
And then there's the most humbling one of all, voiding.
The biological urge to dump excess weight.
Which is a very polite way of saying you might wet yourself.
In extreme life or death fear, yes. But in the office, it manifests as that sudden, urgent, undeniable need to use the bathroom right before you have to give a big presentation. That is not a coincidence. Your ancient body is screaming, "We need to be as light as possible to run fast. Dump the cargo now."
It really just highlights how much we are just these meat machines,
Mm-hmm.
We like to think we are these sophisticated, rational agents, but you introduce one drop of adrenaline and we're right back to being lizards.
But that realization is the whole key to this protocol approach. Once you accept that you are a machine with a very specific and sometimes glitchy operating system, you can stop judging yourself for the glitches. You can stop saying, "I'm weak," and you can start looking for the manual override.
Okay, that's a perfect transition. That brings us to section 2, battlefield psychology and hardware hacks. So if we know the machine is going to break down under pressure, how do we prevent the breakdown in the first place? The source brings up something called Cooper's color code.
This comes from Jeff Cooper, who is a true legend in the tactical community. It's a system of mental states, of situational awareness. His core insight was that the problem isn't usually the threat itself, it's the surprise of the threat. Cooper argued that panic is what happens when you jump too many levels of arousal too quickly.
So walk us through the colors. I think it's fair to say most of us, most of the time, are in condition white, right? Just going about our day.
Exactly. Most people live their entire lives in condition white. That is, unaware and unprepared. You're scrolling on your phone while walking down the street, you're daydreaming in a meeting, you have your noise-canceling headphones on. If a crisis happens in that state, if a car suddenly swerves into your lane, you have to jump from white, which is total relaxation, all the way to red, which is immediate action. That jump is just too big for the nervous system to handle. That's where you freeze. The system crashes.
So the goal isn't to be paranoid all the time, but to just be a little bit more elevated, a little more switched on.
The goal is to live in condition yellow, and that state is relaxed alertness. The mantra for condition yellow is, "I am looking, I am scanning." Think of it like being a good defensive driver. You aren't gripping the steering wheel in terror. You're just aware of the blind spots. You're checking your mirrors every few seconds. You're noticing the car that's been behind you for the last 3 miles. You're relaxed, but you're alert.
So if that car does swerve, you don't panic. You just execute the maneuver you've already thought about.
You just slide into condition orange, which is identifying the specific threat, and then seamlessly into condition red, which is acting. Because you were already halfway there, that chemical dump, that adrenaline flood, it isn't a tsunami that drowns you, it's just a manageable wave you can ride.
That makes so much sense. It's about reducing the delta, the gap between your current state and the crisis state. But, okay, let's say you're in the crisis. You need a decision-making framework. The source talks a lot about the OODA loop.
Colonel John Boyd of the Air Force. The OODA loop is famous in the business world, but it's often really misunderstood. It stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. And the source focuses on where most people get hopelessly stuck.
Which is the orient phase.
Right. Observe is easy. The sales numbers are down 20%. That's data. Orient is where you try to make sense of that data. You synthesize it with your company culture, your past experiences, your fears, your biases, and that's where analysis paralysis lives. You just keep orienting. You ask, what does this mean? Is it a market trend? Is it our fault? Is this a blip or the new normal?
And while you're busy orienting, your competitor's already out there acting and eating your lunch.
Exactly. Boyd's key insight, which was revolutionary, was that speed itself is a weapon. A mediocre decision that is executed violently fast is almost always better than a perfect decision that's made too late. Because by acting, you change the environment.
You force the other side, the competitor or the problem, to react to you. You seize the initiative.
And you generate new data. If you decide to cut prices by 10% and it's the wrong move, you'll find that out immediately from the market's reaction. Then you can run the loop again with better information. But if you just sit in a conference room debating for 3 weeks, you learn nothing and you lose.
He who cycles the OODA loop fastest wins. But let's say I'm not winning. Let's say I'm in the hole. I've had the cortisol dump. My hands are shaking. I can't think straight because my IQ is down 20 points. How do I get my brain back online? The source calls these nervous system controls, or I like this term, bottom-up processing.
This is probably the most practical, actionable part of the entire hardware manual. Top-down processing is you trying to tell yourself, calm down, everything is going to be fine. That never, ever works because the prefrontal cortex, the part that understands logic, is offline. You need bottom-up processing using your physical body to send safety signals up to the brain.
And the first, and maybe the simplest hack, is the visual override, using panoramic vision.
This is pure hardwired biology. When you are stressed or threatened, your eyes automatically go into foveal vision. We call it tunnel vision. You focus intensely, like a laser, on the perceived threat. This is a clear signal to your brain. We are either hunting or we are being hunted.
So by deliberately breaking that tunnel vision, we can break the stress response itself.
Yes. You manually force your eyes into panoramic vision. And you can do this right now as you're listening. Keep your eyes looking straight ahead, but try to see the walls to your left and right at the same time. Try to see the ceiling and the floor simultaneously without moving your eyes. Just soften your gaze.
It feels more open, more spacious.
What you're doing is you're forcing the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, to engage. It is physiologically impossible for your body to remain in a high-alert, fight-or-flight, panic state while you are maintaining panoramic vision. The two systems are fundamentally incompatible.
That is a legitimate cheat code for the human body. The other one you mentioned is the respiratory reset, the physiological sigh. I feel like everyone talks about take a deep breath, but the source is very specific to just deep breathing is often the wrong thing to do.
It can be. If you just take a bunch of big, deep breaths, you can actually off-gas too much CO2 and hyperventilate, which makes the anxiety worse. The physiological sigh is different. It's a specific pattern that neuroscientists at Stanford identified as the fastest way mammals naturally reset their nervous systems. Watch a dog after it gets all worked up barking at the mailman. It'll do a double inhale through the nose and then a long sigh out the mouth. A baby does the exact same thing after a crying jag.
So what's the mechanism there? Why the double inhale specifically?
Your lungs are filled with millions of tiny little air sacs called alveoli. That's where the oxygen exchange with the blood happens. When you get stressed and your breathing gets shallow, a lot of these little sacs collapse and deflate like tiny used balloons. Carbon dioxide then builds up in your bloodstream, and that buildup is a primary driver of agitation and anxiety.
So it's literally a toxicity issue in your blood.
Right. The first inhale of the sigh fills most of the lungs. The second, sharp, top-up inhale creates enough pressure to pop those collapsed alveoli back open. It dramatically increases the surface area for gas exchange. Then, the long, slow exhale through the mouth allows you to dump all that accumulated CO2. It is the single fastest way to physically lower your heart rate and change your blood chemistry. One or two of those, and you are chemically a different person than you were 10 seconds ago.
What about if you're completely frozen? The source talks about something called dorsal vagal shutdown.
That's the oldest part of the system. It's the playing dead response.
Okay.
The lizard brain has decided that fighting and running are both impossible, so the only option left is to shut down completely and hope the predator loses interest. To break that freeze, you need a shock to the system.
Ice water to the face.
Yeah, that's the best one. It triggers the mammalian dive reflex. Splashing ice-cold water on the area of your face under your eyes and around your nose immediately slows the heart and forces the system reset. Or, if you can't get to water, simple motor engagement can work. Squeeze a pen as hard as you can. Do a single squat. You have to send a signal to your nervous system that you are, in fact, still capable of movement.
Okay, so we've stabilized the hardware, we've rebooted the computer. Now we need to install the right software so it doesn't crash again.
Yeah.
Section 3, mental models for execution.
Now that your IQ is back online, you need these frameworks to keep it there. And my absolute favorite one from this stack of sources is the pre-mortem.
I think most people are familiar with the post-mortem. That's what you do after the project has already failed. You sit around and figure out what went wrong.
Which is an autopsy. And it's useful for the next patient, sure, but it does absolutely nothing for the one who just died on the table. The pre-mortem is done before you even start the project. You get the whole team in a room and you say, okay, everyone, imagine it is 30 days from now. The project was a total, unmitigated disaster, a complete failure. Now, tell me the story of why it happened.
So you're forcing the team to envision the failure state not as a possibility, but as a certainty that has already occurred.
Exactly. And a funny thing happens. People who were afraid to speak up before suddenly open up. They'll say, oh, well, in that case, the vendor was probably late with their delivery. The new software probably couldn't handle the user load. Legal probably didn't sign off on the marketing copy in time.
These are all the silent killers, the things people usually keep to themselves because they don't want to be perceived as negative or not a team player.
Right. But by framing it as a detective story about a death that has already happened, you make it psychologically safe to identify all the hidden risks. Then you can build contingency plans for them. But the real value, I think, is psychological. It removes the element of surprise from pressure.
So when the vendor inevitably calls to say they're running late, you don't panic. You just say, there it is. There's the delay we predicted.
And because you predicted it, you already have the contingency plan ready to go. You just execute it. See, pressure is just surprise in disguise. If you remove the surprise, all that's left is a logistics problem. And logistics problems are solvable.
Another model for avoiding that kind of paralysis is the 70% rule.
This is so critical for any kind of high-stakes, fast-moving environment. The source argues that if you wait until you have 100% of the information, you are, by definition, too late. The opportunity is gone, or the crisis has already overwhelmed you. The rule is simple. If you have 70% of the intel you need and 70% confidence in your course of action, you move, you act.
But the big fear there is, what if you're wrong?
Correction is easier than initiation. That's the mantra. You can steer a moving ship. You cannot steer a stationary one. If you act and you're slightly off course, you can adjust. If you sit still, you're just a target.
The source also brings up this idea of inversion. This feels like it comes from the Stoics, or maybe Charlie Munger?
It's in both. The formal name is via negativa, the path of negation. Instead of asking, how do I make this project a wild success, which is a hard question, you invert it. You ask, what would I have to do to absolutely guarantee this project fails?
That feels like a much easier question to answer.
It's way easier. The answers just pour out. To guarantee failure, I would check my email and Slack every 3 minutes, so I have zero time for deep work. I would get only 4 hours of sleep a night. I would say yes to every single meeting request, regardless of the agenda.
It's a painful list because that sounds like a normal Tuesday for a lot of people in the corporate world.
And it immediately exposes the profound stupidity of our default habits. Once you have that list, the strategy is simple. Don't do those things. Just avoid doing the things that guarantee failure. Avoiding stupidity is often a much more powerful strategy than trying to be brilliant.
I want to talk about detachment because the source uses a very vivid image for this technique. It calls it the glass wall.
This is a visualization technique you use when you're right in the middle of the storm. You're in a chaotic meeting, people are shouting. You imagine a thick, soundproof glass wall instantly materializing between you and the chaos. On the other side is the angry client, the falling stock price, all the noise and emotion. But on your side, it's completely silent. You can see all the data coming through the glass, but the emotion cannot touch you.
That sounds, I don't know, a little bit sociopathic, doesn't it? To just disconnect from the feeling of the situation.
The source calls it clinical detachment. And think about an ER surgeon. A patient is wheeled in with a catastrophic injury. They're screaming in pain. Their family is hysterical. If that surgeon engages in deep emotional empathy, if they truly feel the pain and the horror of the moment, their hands will start to shake. They will make a mistake. The patient will die.
So the most compassionate thing the surgeon can do in that moment is actually to be cold and detached.
The most compassionate and effective thing is to treat that human body like a master mechanic treats a complex engine. The fuel line is ruptured, clamp it, pressure is dropping, increase the flow here, sutures here. They have to focus on the mechanism, not the tragedy, and you have to do the same with your work. When the crisis hits, you aren't you anymore. You are the mechanic.
The source even suggests creating an alter ego to help with this process.
Yeah, the Sasha Fierce effect. Beyoncé famously created an alter ego to perform because she was actually quite shy. You can create a professional avatar for your high-pressure work. Call him the operator or the fixer. The operator doesn't have feelings. He has objectives. So if the big deal falls through, you aren't a failure. The operator strategy just didn't work this time. It creates a buffer that protects your core self-worth from the inevitable failures and setbacks of your work.
Okay, let's move to section 4, which is stress inoculation. So we've talked about how to handle the pressure when it arrives, but the source argues we can and should train for it beforehand. We need to harden the nervous system.
You cannot learn to swim by reading a book about fluid dynamics. It's impossible. You have to get in the water. Stress inoculation is about deliberately and safely triggering the stress response in a controlled environment so you can practice dampening it. You're building emotional calluses.
And the primary method, the one everyone is talking about lately, is the cold plunge.
Right. And everyone talks about the cold plunge for reducing inflammation or getting a dopamine hit, and those things are true. But for our purposes today, for pressure management, we are using it for one specific reason: to master the shiver response.
That initial gasp and shock when you hit the cold water.
Exactly. When your body hits that 40-degree water, your entire nervous system screams, danger. You gasp for air, your heart rate spikes, you want to jump out. It is a perfect panic mimic. The training is to get in and immediately suppress that gasp. Force your exhale to be long and slow. Use the physiological sigh. You are telling your body, I am in charge here, not you. I am safe.
You are training the pilot to fly the plane calmly while all the alarms are blaring in the cockpit.
That's the perfect way to put it. If you can learn to stay calm while your body is screaming at you in freezing water, you can absolutely stay calm when a colleague is screaming at you in a heated meeting. The physiological signal is identical.
Another form of inoculation mentioned is social risk.
Rejection therapy. We are deeply, evolutionarily hardwired to fear tribal expulsion. Being ostracized meant death. That's why public speaking is more terrifying for many people than death itself. The source suggests you deliberately trigger this fear in small doses. Go to a coffee shop and ask for a 10% discount for no reason at all.
Oh, that sounds excruciating. My heart is pounding just thinking about doing that.
It is. Your heart will pound, your palms will sweat, the barista will look at you like you're insane. They will say no, but then you will walk out and you will realize, I didn't die. You are inoculating yourself bit by bit against the crippling fear of social judgment.
And finally, noise injection.
This is a great one for people who work from home in quiet environments. Try to do your most complex, cognitively demanding task while listening to a recording of a crying baby, or chaotic street noise, or people arguing. It forces your brain to build stronger gating mechanisms, better filters. You are essentially training your focus muscle to lift heavier and heavier weights.
Before we pivot to the really esoteric stuff, we have to touch on the sleep tax. Because I feel like this is the one that high performers and ambitious people constantly think they can cheat.
And you just can't. The research is absolutely settled on this. If you are consistently getting only 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, you are operating with the same level of cognitive impairment as someone who is legally drunk.
Cognitive intoxication. That's a powerful phrase.
You would never dream of going into a critical merger negotiation after drinking 5 shots of tequila. But people do it on 4 hours of sleep all the time, and they think they're fine. They're not. You become emotionally volatile, your logic is impaired, and your creativity is zero. If you absolutely cannot sleep, the source strongly recommends using NSDR non-sleep deep rest.
Which is a protocol we'll actually touch on again later because it overlaps pretty directly with some of the death practices.
Indeed it does. It's all connected.
Okay, so we have built the ultimate pressure-proof human being. We've hacked the nervous system. We've installed the mental software. We've inoculated the system against fear. But now we have to talk about the one pressure that no amount of cold plunging could ultimately prevent.
The end of the line. The final transition.
We're pivoting now to Section 5, the Advanced Manual Protocols for Death. And I just want to be clear to you listening, we aren't just taking some bizarre left turn into ghost stories here. The source material frames this as the ultimate application of protocol.
It really is. I mean, if high-performance pressure management is all about maintaining consciousness and control during a high-stakes transition, then death is the Super Bowl. It is the most radical transition a consciousness can possibly undergo. And these texts we have, they come mainly from the Ayurvedic and the Hindu Tantric traditions. They treat it with the same level of granular procedural detail that the military treats a parachute jump.
It begins with what the source calls predictive analytics. Just like a server throws a bunch of error logs before it finally crashes, the body apparently sends out very specific signals that the exit is approaching. These are called arishta lakshanas.
Yes, these are physiological markers that the life force, which they call prana, is beginning to withdraw from the physical system. The battery is slowly being disconnected from the hardware.
The most specific and, I think, testable one mentioned is the breath anomaly.
This is fascinating. So most people never notice this, but your breath isn't symmetrical throughout the day. It operates on a natural cycle called the swara. Roughly every 90 minutes or so, your dominant nostril switches from left to right, then back again. It's a polarity cycle, and it's deeply connected to balancing the brain hemispheres.
Right. It helps regulate things like body temperature and even brain function, switching between creative and analytical modes.
Correct. But the texts claim that as death approaches, this fundamental polarity begins to break down. The oscillation stops. The specific marker is this. If the breath flows continuously through one single nostril for a full 24 hours without switching, death is predicted within 3 years. If it stays locked in one nostril for 2 or 3 days straight, death is considered imminent.
It's like the system's AC current is switching over to DC current. The natural life-sustaining rhythm is gone.
Exactly. The system is locking up for its final shutdown.
There are also some very strange visual distortions. The source talks about shadow distortion.
This one is particularly eerie. The text says that if you look at your own shadow in the bright sunlight and you see it without a head, or if the shadow appears to be torn or perforated, it's a sign that the subtle body, the energetic blueprint of the person, is already beginning to disintegrate.
So the energy field is dissolving before the physical body does.
That's the idea. And then you have what are called sensory inversions. For instance, we all have a kind of background noise in our system, an inner hum. If you plug your ears tight right now, you'll hear a kind of rumbling. That's the sound of your own blood flow and nervous system activity.
The source says if you plug your ears and you hear absolute, total silence.
It means the prana has withdrawn from the auditory nerve, the exit sequence has begun. Another one is the inability to see the tip of your own nose when you look down. These are ancient calibration tests.
So if these check engine lights are flashing on the dashboard, the protocol has to shift. You move from the project of living to the project of leaving. This brings us to Section 6, Launchpad Physics and Environmental Engineering.
The goal here is to actively control the exit. The source argues pretty forcefully that you can't control when you die, but you absolutely can and should control how you die. And the how is what determines where you go next.
Directionality seems to be a huge factor here. We are specifically told to die north.
This is based on simple magnetism. We know the Earth is a giant magnet with a north and south pole. The texts advise that we normally sleep with our heads to the east or south to either align with or neutralize that magnetic pull for restorative sleep. But when you are dying, you want to reverse that. You align the body so the head points directly to the north.
That's the logic there.
You are trying to eject the consciousness upward, out of the body. The belief is that the Earth's powerful magnetic pull helps to drag the energy of the body toward the head, specifically toward the crown chakra at the top of the skull. You want a high realm exit. You don't want the energy being pulled down toward the lower, more primal centers. You're literally using the planet's magnetic field as a booster rocket.
And you have to get the person off the bed. This is called grounding.
Pushayana. It means resting on the earth. A modern bed is an insulator. You have a rubber mattress, synthetic sheets, a metal frame. The dying brain is firing off chaotic electrical storms. It's a short-circuiting system. By placing the body directly on the floor, or ideally on the earth, you allow that chaotic electrical charge to discharge safely. Calms the storm.
You're literally grounding the electrical signal.
Exactly. It allows for a much more peaceful release rather than a violent, convulsive struggle at the end.
And then there are the subtle mechanics involving things like Tosi leaves and Ganga water. I always assumed these were just symbolic religious rituals, but the source explains them as almost like chemical engineering.
In a way, yes. Tulsi, what we call holy basil, is noted in Ayurvedic texts for having a high mercury content and a unique electrical potency. Placing a leaf in the mouth of the dying is said to purify the throat center, ensuring the energy, the prana, doesn't get stuck there on its way out. You often hear that death rattle in the throat of the dying. This is meant to clear that specific passageway.
And the soundscape. This seems incredibly important and actionable for anyone who is sitting with a dying relative right now.
This is absolutely critical. The sense of hearing is the very last sense to go. The person might look completely comatose, but the audio recorder is still running, so the protocol is extremely strict. Do not cry, do not argue about the will in the room, do not express your own fear or grief.
Because the departing consciousness is in a hypersensitive, suggestible state.
It is. If you cry and wail, you are creating a powerful emotional tether. You are literally pulling them back into a body that is failing them, and this causes immense confusion and suffering. Instead, your job is to provide a clear, calm guidance signal. You chant or speak a mantra calmly and clearly into the right ear.
Why the right ear specifically?
In Ayurvedic and yogic anatomy, the right side of the body is the Pingala Nadi, the sun channel. It's connected to alertness, logic, and clarity. The left side is the Ida Nadi, the moon channel, connected to memory, emotion, and the past. You don't want the dying person getting lost in a flood of old memories. You want them to be as alert and clear as possible for the most important transition of their existence.
So the person has died, the monitor is flatlined. In the West, our work is done. We think, okay, they're gone. But the source argues the most important work is just beginning. Section 7. The 13-day construction project.
This is probably the most complex and, to our modern minds, the most bizarre part of the protocol. It's a series of rituals called Antyeshti. And the central radical idea is that the funeral isn't for the living to grieve, it is for the dead to be built.
Build? What does that even mean?
When the soul, or the consciousness, leaves the physical body, the source describes it as a naked energy ball. It's just a raw spark of awareness. It's disoriented, it's confused, it's vulnerable. In this state, it is called a preta, which translates roughly as a ghost. It is hungry and lost. It cannot travel to the next realm, the ancestral realm, without a vehicle.
It needs a spacesuit to travel through the afterlife.
That is a perfect analogy. It needs a subtle body, which is called a yatana deha. And the rituals, specifically the daily offering of rice balls or pindadan, are essentially a 3D printing process for this new body, this spacesuit.
Walk us through that timeline. How do you build a body out of rice balls?
It's a 10-day construction project. On day 1, the ritual offering constructs the new head. On day 2, the offering builds the eyes and ears. Day 3, the torso and shoulders. It proceeds limb by limb, day by day, until by day 10, the vital airs, the subtle metabolic systems of the new body, are installed and switched on.
This is incredibly precise. So what happens if you don't do this? What if you're a modern family and you just cremate the person and go to the pub for a wake?
The source is very, very grim about this. It says if you skip the construction, the entity is left crippled. It might be just a head floating in the ether or a torso without legs to move. It cannot complete its journey. It stays stuck in the atmospheric layer closest to Earth, in the realm of the living.
And that, according to this source, is what we call a haunting.
Precisely. A ghost isn't some evil monster. A ghost is the result of a botched construction job. It's a disabled soul that is suffering, confused, and desperately trying to get the attention of its living relatives to please finish the work so it can move on.
That is a completely heartbreaking and totally different reframing of the entire paranormal world.
It is. The whole process finally completes on day 12 with a ritual called the Sapindikarana. This is where the priest symbolically mixes the rice ball representing the newly built ghost with the rice balls representing the established ancestors, the father, grandfather, great-grandfather.
It's like merging the new computer file into the main server.
Yes. The preta, the ghost, is formally promoted to Pitru, an ancestor. They are integrated into the family collective on the other side. The haunting stops because the journey is finally complete.
But this entire protocol assumes a normal, natural death. The source has a whole fascinating section on anomalous deaths, when the system crashes unexpectedly.
Forensic spirituality, yeah. So let's talk about suicide. The source describes this as a silver cord problem.
The connection between the soul and the physical body.
Right. The theory is that you are born with a certain amount of karmic fuel, a lifespan, say. You're meant to live 80 years. If you sever that cord prematurely at age 30 through suicide, the physical body is dead, but the prana, the life force battery, is still fully charged. It was not scheduled to shut down for another 50 years.
So you have this high-energy spirit with no container, no body to ground it.
And it gets trapped in a feedback loop. The source says that suicide victims often get stuck reliving the moment of their death over and over again because the emotional and energetic imprint is so high. Standard funeral rituals don't work because the frequency of the spirit is too chaotic. You need a special intervention called Narayan Bali. It's basically a plea to a higher admin, to the god Vishnu, to come in and override the system and manually cut the loop.
What about accidents? A sudden car crash or an explosion?
In those cases, the soul is often injected from the body so fast and so violently that it doesn't even realize it's dead. It's in a state of profound shock. It tries to go home. It tries to talk to its spouse who can't see or hear it.
This is literally the plot of the movie The Sixth Sense.
It's exactly that. And the spirit gets frustrated, confused, and sometimes angry. The remedy here isn't a magical intervention, it's education. The family is supposed to read specific scriptures, like the Bhagavata Saptaha, out loud in the home for a week. The idea is that the confused spirit is listening, and you are basically explaining to it, look, you were in a car crash, your body has died, it's okay. Your journey now is to move on. Look for the light. Don't keep looking back at the wreckage.
You're essentially debriefing the dosed.
You are orienting them. It's the ODA loop for the afterlife. Observe. You are dead.
Yeah.
Orient. That's okay. Here's the map. Decide. Move on. Act. Go.
So let's look at where they are supposed to be moving to. Section 8, Afterlife Mechanics. The source talks about crossing the Vetarni River.
Right, and traditionally in the myths, this is described as a terrifying river of blood and pus and fire, very heavy metal. But the esoteric psychological interpretation is even more terrifying. The Vaitarni is the river of your own trauma.
It's not an external river, it's your own subconscious baggage made manifest.
It's every suppressed emotion, every cruelty you committed, every fear you ignored during your life. At death, it all flows out of you and forms a literal barrier that you have to cross. You have to navigate your own filth to get to the other side.
And to do that, you need a boat.
The boat is Dine Charity. Specifically, the ritual mentioned is donating a cow, which is called Godan.
This always seemed like a purely agrarian, maybe even cynical ritual to me. Give a valuable cow to the priest. But the source frames it entirely in energetic terms.
Think about what a cow represents in that culture. It represents sattva, pure, calm, gentle, nonviolent, motherly energy. It's the opposite of trauma and chaos. By giving that away selflessly, you generate a massive burst of sattvic energy for your own account. The myth says you hold the cow's tail to be pulled across the river. The esoteric logic is that the merit of that pure charitable act acts as a shield or a raft. It allows you to float over your own guilt and trauma.
And then, once you cross, you meet Chitragupta, the great accountant.
The keeper of the ledger. The Akashic record. This is the life review. But here is the mechanism that I find so profound and so just. It's not some bearded god sitting on a throne judging you. The mechanism of judgment is radical empathy.
What do you mean by that?
In the disembodied state, you have no ego. You have no defensive walls. So when the record plays back the moment you screamed at your child or the moment you cheated a business partner, you don't just watch it like a movie, you become them.
You feel it entirely from their perspective.
You feel the terror and confusion in the heart of that child. You feel the sting of betrayal in the heart of that partner. You experience the precise emotional impact you had on the world with zero filter.
So if you were a tyrant who caused immense suffering,
you experience the collective suffering of every single person you crushed all at once. That is hell. It's not a pit of fire created by a vengeful god. It's the burning, inescapable realization of what you yourself did. And the source says the soul then judges itself. You feel so much shame and pain that you crave purification. You literally ask to be sent to the lower realms to burn off that karmic debt.
That is terrifyingly fair. It's the ultimate feedback loop.
It really is. The system is perfectly just.
The source also brings up something practical, these animal mediums. Crows and dogs.
Right. If you travel in India or parts of Asia, you'll see people leaving food offerings for crows during these death rituals. It's believed that the visual spectrum of crows overlaps with the Preta dimension, the ghost realm. They are the couriers. If the crow comes and eats the offering, it's considered a signal of receipt. Message delivered, Grandpa got the food. Dogs are traditionally associated with the deities of death, like Yama and Bhairava. Dogs are said to be able to sense the unique frequency of death. You'll often hear stories of all the dogs in a village howling right before someone passes away. The belief is that a dog at the deathbed can act as a guide or a protector for the departing soul, warding off negative entities during the transition.
Okay, so we have the map, we have the construction project for the vehicle, but can we actually practice for this trip? Section 9, simulation training for the soul.
This is the final and maybe the most important takeaway. You don't have to wait for the heart attack to test any of this out. You can and should practice dying every single night.
Through the practice of Yoga Nidra.
Yogic sleep. On the surface, it's a guided meditation for deep relaxation. But physiologically, it is a direct mimic of the death process. You lie down, you systematically withdraw your sensory awareness from your limbs one by one. You slow the breath, you consciously drop your brain waves down into the delta state, the state of deep, dreamless sleep.
But the catch is, you're supposed to stay awake through it all.
That is the entire trick. Normally, when we fall asleep, our conscious awareness switches off. We go into a little coma. That is what happens to most people at death. In Yoga Nidra, the body goes completely to sleep. It is fully paralyzed, deeply resting. But the core I am awareness remains lucid, clear, and continuous. You are watching the body sleep. You are watching the void.
And if you can do that.
If you can master the art of maintaining awareness while the body falls into sleep, the source says you can maintain awareness while the body falls into death. You won't panic. You won't get lost. You won't sever the cord violently. You will consciously execute the protocol.
And there's one final cheat code mentioned, the guru's override.
The get out of jail free card. The source says if you have a true, fully realized spiritual master, they can intervene at the moment of death. The tradition says that at that final moment, the guru appears to the disciples' inner vision. They take on the disciples' remaining karma, their baggage, and they personally redirect the soul to a specific high-level domain. They essentially bypass Chitragupta's ledger entirely.
They smuggle you through celestial customs.
Essentially, yes. But finding such a person is exceedingly rare. So for the rest of us, it's probably better to practice the Yoga Nidra.
This has been incredibly heavy, but also strangely, profoundly practical.
It is practical. Because whether you're using the OODA loop to handle a crisis in the boardroom or the exit mantra to handle the deathbed, the fundamental principle is identical.
Preparation, protocol, and detachment.
Don't wait for the crisis to arrive to figure out who you are and what your systems are. The time to build the levee is long before the flood comes.
So let's give everyone listening a final checklist. Based on all this, what do they do today?
Okay, for the immediate. The very next time you feel that little spike of cortisol, you're in traffic, you get a stressful email, the kids are screaming, test the hardware, do the physiological sigh, 2 quick inhales through the nose, 1 long exhale through the mouth, or force panoramic vision. See the walls. Prove to yourself in a low-stakes moment that you can override the biology.
And for the long term.
Run a pre-mortem on your own life. What conflicts are unresolved? What resentments are you holding on to? If you were to exit today, what residue would you leave behind? Go and fix it now. Don't leave a mess for your ghost to deal with. And maybe, just maybe, try a Yoga Nidra guided meditation tonight. Just practice the art of letting go.
I want to leave them with that final provocative thought from the source.
Death is only terrible for those who haven't investigated it. For the wise, it is just changing clothes. And so the question these texts leave us with is, are you the clothes or are you the one wearing them? Are you the vehicle or are you the driver?
Something to mull over in the dark tonight. Thanks for diving in with us.
It's always a pleasure.